y'all could feel that just awkward eye contact between me and Kevin right there. It was just like uneasy. He just gave me the eyes. But look, my name is Chris. You guys, if you've been attending here for a while, you recognize me. I'm usually up here playing guitar or singing. And I got to tell you, one of the things that makes me most nervous on the weeks that I'm speaking is when the band crushes it like they did today. Because I'm going to show up on Monday or Tuesday like, Chris, man, you're good, man. We just get rid of you. So, but they did a great job. If you see them hanging out, give them a pat on the back, a high five or something. Let them know you appreciate them. They work real hard every week to do great. You can clap for them, sure. And so I'll be looking for a new job. If you have any ideas, let me know. But it's real cool to be here and doing this series. It Takes a Village. It's been an interesting, fun series as each week we've got to hear from a different staff member and get a little bit of a different perspective on this idea of being a village. The first week, Jason walked us through, maintaining it as a family. Dan walked us through what it means to kind of work on mentorship. And Becky, who's my office mom, hey, office mom, she came up to me a minute ago, was like, can I be your office sister? But she's my office mom. I love her. But Becky got to talk to us about maintaining honor in your family and how that pours out into other relationships. And I'm going to jump in a little bit and talk about what it means for the bigger picture of the coming generations and the life of our community. But to start it off, I got to take y'all back in time a little bit to when I was 16 years old. Now I am 30 years old. But y'all got to get in the time machine. I'm 32 years old. It's okay. Every day I'm learning to own it more and more. The 30s are here. But when I was 16 years old, I was learning how to drive, and I was learning on a minivan. Now look, for all you fellas out there who hate on the minivans, I liked it. I could take all my friends places. I could carry all my gear. I had guitars and amps and stuff. I had a minivan access. I don't understand the hate of the minivan. But I'm very secure in my manhood, I think is probably what it is. But anyways, I drove, started learning to drive in my parents' minivan, and then the day came for me to get my own vehicle, and what I ended up doing was buying my dad's car, which was a 1997 Ford Escort. So how many of y'all ever owned an Escort? All right. It's a little bit different than driving a minivan. It's not as much room for friends and stuff. But really what was the most complicated part for me was that it was a stick shift, a manual transmission. I wasn't used to that. So my dad would take me out and teach me what to do, and eventually I got confident with it. But look, man, it's still tricky after you spend a lot of time driving an automatic. I'll tell you, to this day, I prefer driving a manual now. But getting there was tough. So one day I'm hanging out with my friend. His name is John Wallace. We used to call him Big John Stud. But we met slinging chicken together at Chick-fil-A. That's what we did in high school to make some money. And so me and Big John Stud were out hanging out one day, driving around in this Ford Escort. And John had never really met my parents up to this point in my life. He was a work friend, so it's not like he was over at the house all the time. He might have run into them one or twice. I don't really remember. Part of being 32 is you don't remember 16 that well. But I remember we were driving, and we're coming home to my parents' house, and as I pull into the driveway, the garage is open. I see my old minivan in there, and as I go to hit the brakes, what I actually did was I stepped on the clutch. Now, if you step on the clutch, that will not stop the vehicle. And so what ended up happening is my little Escort goes forward, hits the back of my parents' minivan. My parents' minivan ends up pushing into the garage, slamming against the wall, and it was earthquake status at my house. What I love about this story is, like I said, John hadn't met my parents yet. So my mom comes out like, what just happened? And I'm sitting there like, oh, I'm going to die. Like, y'all know when you did that thing and you're just like, I'm dead, like it's over. And I'm like, John, this is my mom. Like, it's just such an awkward moment. Just such an awkward moment, but that's what happened. I never got to ask John about it. I wondered, like, if, like, it'd be cool to call him now, like, hey, remember that? Like, what were you feeling? If it was me, I'd have just been laughing. Like, I'd have felt awkward, but I'd probably be laughing at my buddy. But the reason I tell you that story is because there's an important twist that it takes. You got to look at the picture. There is a big hole in the wall of my parents' house, and I'm now responsible for making this right. You know, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix. I still don't really know how to fix stuff. I'm not a very handy person. But this introduces this guy. His name is Robert. And Robert went to my church, and Robert did construction. And so I talked to him. I was like, man, like, knocked the van into my parents' wall. Like, there's no way you can say that and feel good. I was like, I knocked a van into my parents' garage, and I don't know what to do. And Robert was a real cool guy, real chill, a little bit older. I want to say he's probably in his 30s or 40s around this time. And he's like, look, man, I got you covered. I'm going to take care of it. But you got to do two things for me. You got to show up and help, and you got to buy pizza. So I remember him coming over, and his truck pulled up. He has all his equipment, all his gear going on. And we're sitting there, and we're fixing it up. And you'd never even know that some irresponsible punk knocked a van through the wall. That's a real story in my life. Like, I'm just now coming to grips with that. But you would never know that had happened. And what blows me away about that is you have a guy, like, he does this for a living. Like, that's how he makes his money. That's how he earns his wages, is he fixes things. And he was willing to take some time out of his day where he probably could have been out making some money, providing for his family, taking care of his needs. And he took some time out and said, hey, I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to teach you a little bit. It's great, and it has left a mark on me my whole life that now, even though I don't always do it perfectly, when opportunity comes my way, I want to use the gifts and talents and abilities I have to help folks. All because of what Robert did for me in this moment. Now, I've had the benefit, pleasure, or chaos, however you want to look at it, of working with people my whole life. Like, my whole adult life has been working with people. I did youth ministry for about 5.5 years in local churches. Then I did 2.5 years working as a mental health therapist. And now I do all of that. I work here at the church with our band. I work with our student ministry. And I still work as a mental health therapist. All that, not because I'm trying to be like, look at my resume, y'all, but because I want y'all to get the picture. I've spent a lot of time working with people. And there's one thing that I have noticed the whole way through, whether I'm working with little ones, teenagers, parents, adults who aren't parents, is that everybody is open to influence. Everybody is open to influence. I want to jump into a passage here in a moment out of the book of 1 Timothy. And we're Bible people around here, so if you have a Bible, you can get it out. If you use the Bible on your phone with the app, you can pull that up. But if you don't have a Bible, it's all good. We got you covered. We give them out for free. You can go to our Get Connected table, which is over here in the lobby. Let them know, like, hey, man, Chris was talking about Bible. I don't have one of those. And they will give you one. You can also download the Bible app in the App Store. You just search for YouVersion Bible app. We didn't make it. It's not our app. It's just a really good app, so we want you guys to have that. You can put it on your phone, your iPad. You can also look at their site on your computer. However you roll, you can get the Bible that way. But we do also have a Forefront app you can check out. It has has an option in there that you can take notes. Also has the ability for you to go back and stream old sermons and messages if you want to go back and check that out. So you can download those. But we are Bible people around here. So if you don't have a Bible, we want to help you get one. If you do have a Bible, let's move it over. In a moment, we're going to look at a passage in 1 Timothy 4. We're not going to go there quite yet, but if you want to get a little bit ahead. This comes out of the book of 1 Timothy. And the book of 1 Timothy is a letter that Paul writes to a man named Timothy. And this is who Paul is. Paul is like big dog church leader guy. He's been going around planting churches, teaching people how to lead churches. And once he gets a church kind of established, he moves on and helps another church get established, and he sets leaders up in these churches. And this is what Paul's been doing for most of his ministry life. And so when you get to the book of 1 Timothy, he's writing a letter to Timothy, who is one of these new guys stepping up to be a church leader. So in the particular case of Timothy, Timothy is probably around 30 to 40 years old, which back in his day was a very young man. Like, they lived in a culture where the older you were, the more trusted you were, the wiser you were considered. And so for being a young man of 30 to 40 years old, he was kind of considered young. So Paul writes to encourage him, and check this out. It's in 1 Timothy 4:12. Paul writes, "Don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity." Now, can you imagine the pressure of being a young guy and being told, like, hey, this is what you need to do to gain influence, is you need to set an example in speech, the way you talk to people? I struggle with that. Some of y'all know if you hang out with me. In speech, in your conduct, the way you act, in love, which is the attitude you have towards people, in faith, which is what guides your life, and in purity, which is what you let into your life. To be told at 30 to 40 years old, hey, you're going to lead a community and you have to have all this lined up to do it well, it's intimidating. It's intimidating. I mean, can you imagine you're this guy leading this new community? There are obviously going to be people in this community that are twice your age, and in a culture where age is gold and where age is wisdom and where age is leadership, it would be intimidating. I know this because I get intimidated sometimes, especially when I work in my counseling office. I'll have married couples that want to come and get some counseling, and it's not that I don't know what to do, but sometimes I'm like, y'all know, like, I'm 30 and single. Like, let me guide you. Or so I have right now a guy who comes, he actually drives quite a bit to come see me, which kind of flatters me, but he's in his 60s, and I'm like, dude, you probably could teach me some things, like, but I'll help you out. I get intimidated in those situations sometimes. And so I can't imagine what it'd be like to be Paul, to be Timothy, getting this encouragement from Paul, because Timothy is in a very hard, intimidating situation. But this is what Paul knew about Timothy's community, and this is what I know about our community, and I want you guys to check this out. The next generation needs godly leadership. Hear that again. The next generation needs godly leadership. When Paul writes this to Timothy, it's not that he wants to give Timothy a list of here's some things you really need to be so you can be a good leader. He's saying the next generation needs godly leadership, and this is how you provide it for them. Now, if you grew up going to church, like I did, like high school is when I started going to church. This passage out of 1 Timothy was kind of always used to, like, teach us how to be good kids. Like, you want to be a good kid, man? Like, follow 1 Timothy 4:12. Almost like, I don't know the right word for it, like opposite rebellion. Like, man, if you live like this, you can show all those adults, like, they can't look down on you because you're young. Like, it's almost just like opposing rebellion. It was weird. And as I've gotten older and I read through it, I was like, that verse is not necessarily meant to teach kids and teenagers how to be good kids and teenagers. Not that that's like a bad verse for them, but it was to tell Timothy how to be a godly leader for his people because he was young. Paul knew that Timothy's community needed godly leadership. And I know that our community needs godly leadership. So along with writing letters to Timothy, Paul also wrote a letter to a church in Corinth, which was a city back in the day. They were also establishing a new church community. And so while Paul was jumping around and helping churches get set up, he would write letters to people, he would write letters to churches, he would help them out and say, here's some things you guys need to know, or they might give him some issues they were having, and he would give them some advice. I mean, if you read the different letters that Paul wrote in the New Testament, you get lost real quick because he's like hitting so many subjects. But there is a strong passage that he uses, and it comes in 2 Corinthians 4:4. 4. I want you guys to look at this and read it with me. It says, "The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God." Now that's heavy language, and I want, Murray, if you'll leave that up for me for just a second while I kind of break it down. That's heavy language, and that's language that we might not even relate to. But when Paul talks about the God of this age, he's basically just saying, guys, there's a lot of stuff out there that wants to take your attention off of what's important. There's a lot of stuff out there that wants to take your attention away from God, away from Jesus, away from the good things that God provides, and blind us. And you guys know that as well as I do because you live in the same world that I live in. And you know that everywhere you go, people are trying to grab our attention. Now, I've always been fascinated by Hot Topic. Look, Hot Topic is the store in the mall, if y'all don't know about it. I don't know. But look, Hot Topic is the store in the mall, and it is a store that kind of pushes, it doesn't push pop culture, it kind of pushes like alternative rock culture, and it's just like any store. It kind of goes through phases of trends, and but I've always been fascinated by it because my experience has been, and I don't mean this to like label anybody in particular, it's just some people that I've hung around in my life, is they sell an image that some people just jump on and like live in, which is cool. There's nothing wrong with like having fashion and music that you like. But what I find interesting about it is that they live to sell this image. And look, I'm not slamming them. I'm not slamming anybody I buy stuff there sometimes. Not now because I'm old, but when I was not old, I used to buy stuff there, okay? Actually, one of my favorite bands that I listen to, I bought my first CD of them at Hot Topic on a whim. It changed my life, so I got no hate for Hot Topic. But what I find interesting is that Hot Topic is owned by a woman named Lisa Harper. Or she doesn't own it, she's the CEO. I don't know how all the business structure of things work. But she's the CEO, and like what she does is she watches cultural trends and she figures out how to implement them into the store. And as I was looking this up, I was like, I wonder who owns Hot Topic. And she's this like real nice, clean-cut, middle-aged woman, dresses nice. Like basically she does not live in the image that Hot Topic sells, which is fine. She can do what she wants. I just find it interesting because as I was researching a little bit about it, I read that she locked down about $4 million as CEO in 2012. And I was like, man, I'm about to go work for Hot Topic. So actually it works out. The band doesn't need me. I'm going to go roll out. I'm going to go work at Hot Topic, lock it down, all right? So I'm putting all this together, and I'm like, so what I see is you got this middle-aged, clean-cut, nice-looking white gal, and she made $4 million in 1 year selling an image to people. Again, I don't like have any bones to pick if you like that style, image, it's whatever. I just find it interesting because she knows the power of influence, and she uses the power of influence to make a profit. That's how business works. Again, not slamming it. It just is what it is. But what it has kind of led me to believe is that when it comes to influence, and check this out, guys, when it comes to influence, it's not about if we will be influenced, but rather what will influence us. It's not about if we will be influenced. It's about what will influence us. Because, like, for real, like, talking about the whole Hot Topic thing, it's kind of silly. I get it. And it's, you know, whatever kind of fashion you want to wear, it's not a big deal. Whatever kind of music you want to listen to is not a big deal. Like, we all can have, you know, whatever we like as far as that goes. But what about the influence in your life when it comes to how you treat the other people in your life? Who influences you when it comes to how you treat other people? Who influences when it comes down to how you treat people who are different from you? What voice is being an influence in your life when it comes to the times you run into people who are hurting and people who are broken, people who are lost? How about the way you treat yourself and other people in relationships? What about the decisions that you make when it comes to how you use your money, how you spend your time, what you do with your stuff? It's not a matter of if you'll be influenced, but what influences us. And, like I said, clothing and music, not that big of a deal, but when it comes to these deeper decisions in life, we have an influence that speaks to us, that works through us. And that's why when Paul writes to Timothy in that first passage we looked at, he says, you have to be an example like this. You have to be a good, pure example for your people because they are going to have a whole bunch of other voices trying to influence them. And so that's the picture. The next generation needs godly influence, and it doesn't really matter. It's not a matter of if we'll be influenced, but what will influence us. And this is why I know influence is important. I want to tell you a story about a dude I used to see at the practice, about a 13-year-old kid, and I've been seeing him for a while, man. He had some family drama. Mom and dad couldn't decide if they were going to stay together. He had an older sister who was kind of off the rails, just didn't know what was going on in his life. And they were at a point in their family where mom and dad did decide, hey, we're going to stick this out. Mom and dad were seeing somebody to help them out with their marriage stuff. And I remember mom dropping this kid off for an appointment with me. And he's in tears. And I'm talking about, like, have you ever had that amount of crying where you, like, can't breathe and you feel like you're going to throw up and you're, like, dry? He was in that level of tears. And so I bring him in the office. I'm like, wow, what's going on, guys? And she says, well, I decided that I'm leaving. And I just told him in the car on the way here. So, first of all, I was like, well, I forgot to tell you, I'm actually leaving early today. There are things that sometimes we think as counselors that we can't put out in the air, but I was mad. I was like, so you just completely rocked his world, knowing that in 5 minutes you're going to take him to see his counselor, and, like, did you think I was going to be able to make this all better for him? Like, we could have had this conversation together, the three of us, if that needed to happen, or, like, we could have done this in a lot better way. So I spent 45 minutes with a crying 13-year-old in my office. There was no conversation to be had. And I just let him cry, and I just told him, hey, man, if I were you, I would be crying too. Like, this situation sucks, man. That's all I could do in that time. And the reason I tell you that story is because that is the beginning of a time for this young man where, depending on what voices he has influencing his life, man, the decisions he's going to make, the way he's going to interact with his family, the way he's going to interact with his parents, with his sister, the way he's going to interact with his school, it's all going to be affected. And I consider myself humbled, and I don't know if lucky is the right word, but humbled that I could be one of those voices for him. But shortly after that moment, he didn't want to see me anymore. And I don't know what happened to that dude. It is so important, the kind of influences and voices that we allow into our lives. I want to read one last passage for you guys, and it comes out of the book of Psalm. It's actually Psalm chapter 1. And so I'm going to read this if you guys will follow along with me. It says, blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. It continues and says, that person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. That's a lot of heavy language again. I'm going to just break it down for you real quick. You can sum up Psalm 1 by saying you become like the people you hang around. You become the company you keep. whoever's in your life influences you. And this particular passage outlines and says you go one way or the other. You're either leading people toward the life of a life of light and life and good, or you're leading people down a path of destruction, of wickedness, of hurt, of pain. Whoever speaks into your life, whoever has voice into your life, they have a real role in who you turn out to be and the decisions that you make. It's crazy to me. Little thing about me is I'm a kind of a science nerd when it comes to mental health and the brain and stuff like that. Probably comes with the territory of being a counselor. But science is starting to realize something that I think is like super cool. But again, that's like my nerdy side. But the research is fairly new on this. But what's being discovered is that the human heart has neurons in it. Neurons are the electrical bolts that shoot back and forth in your brain, that keep you thinking, that deal with your emotions. Like, you function because you have electricity going back and forth in your brain. Science is discovering that some of that is going on in your heart as well. And there are a couple studies that have come out that say your heart has about an 8 to 10 foot radius of where that electric field is going. So like right now, I don't know if I can reach you with my electric field, James. But watch out. But you have about 8 to 10 feet of this radius of your neurons in your heart just kind of existing. And what they noticed when they did some tests is they would take somebody, hook them up to a brain scanner thing to check the, activity going on in their brains, and they noticed when somebody else got within that radius, brain waves would change in the person. Like, the way your brain functions will change based on the things that are going on in the heart of the person that is within 8 to 10 feet of you. That kind of just blows me out of the water, but when I think about it, it makes sense. Because have you ever been around a person, you don't have any explanation why, but it's just when they're around, like, you just feel better. You're like, man, I feel pretty good when that dude's hanging out with me. Or on the other end of it, like, somebody comes in and hangs around you, and like the whole tone just gets grumpy. And you have no explanation. Like, you didn't even talk to this dude. He just showed up, and he's in your sphere, and you just feel bad. Like, you guys know that feeling. You guys have had that experience. It's crazy to me that they're like, yeah, well, it's because you guys are 8 to 10 feet within each other's neurons. Like, that's one of the explanations, I guess. I don't know. But that stuff, like, just boggles my mind. I love, one of the things, if you hang out with me and talk to me more, I love it when science catches up and explains things that we've known all along that are rooted in Scripture. Because Psalm 1 said it. It said the people who are around you are going to influence where you go. I want to flip it on its head a little bit. And I want to change the question that we've been looking at. Because for me, the real question now is not if we are an influence, but rather what kind of influence are we? Up to this point, I've been talking about like how we all have the ability to be influenced. We all have the capability to have people who put good influence in our lives, bad influence in our lives. But when you flip it around the other way, we're doing the same thing. We're being an influence. And I want you to sit in that for a moment as you consider the other people who are in this room with you right now. I mean, look, we got neurons interacting all over the place right now, okay? But seriously, as you think about the people that are in this room with you, as you think about the people who are in your home with you, as you think about the people who are at work with you, or all the different places that you go, what kind of influence are you having? Psalm 1 breaks it down and says you're either leading them toward life or you're leading them toward destruction. Where does your influence lead others? Maybe you've never considered that. I mean, I don't think about that every day. I surely don't. But I think it's important for us to think about. And as I was preparing this message, I was reading a few different things, and I was thinking about, what do I really want to talk about when it comes to the next generation of this church? Because I work in student ministry, I was like, man, I'm going to tell everybody, y'all need to hang out with the teenagers. I was like, no, it's really bigger than that. But I did read something that I wanted to share with you from a book called Almost Christian, written by Kendra Dean. And what she says is, the issue with young people is not whether young people can read the Bible. They can. The real issue is, well, really, why would they want to? What have they seen in the church that would suggest that the Bible is a source of power and wonder? When have they seen their parents derive life and joy from reading Scripture? And as I think about that idea that I'm either leading somebody towards life or I'm leading somebody towards destruction, I can walk around all day and be like, yeah, God loves me, and Jesus is taking care of me, and I'm just trying to be faithful. But what do people see when I say that and then compare it to my life? Because according to Kendra Dean in this book, she says, probably one of the reasons that our younger people don't care is because they have a bunch of adults in their life who say church is important, God is important, the Bible is important, but they don't really see it making any difference in their life. That's a challenge to me, because I say I'm a pastor, but do people really see that making a difference in my life? The reason that I started with that story about Robert at the beginning is because it was important to me. It was one of those moments I've never forgotten. And I don't keep up with that dude anymore. We've fallen into the modern world now where it's like, yeah, we're friends on Facebook, but we don't talk. Like, y'all got those friends that you used to hang out with back in the day, and now you just see when they're mad on Facebook. That's kind of the nature of our relationship now is we don't hang out, we don't talk. He's doing his thing. I think he lives out in Tennessee. But that moment has stuck with me forever because somebody took the time and said, I'm going to take one moment here and I'm going to lead you to life. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to love you. I'm going to help you. And it stuck with me. Like, it's part of me. Not something that I do perfectly because I get selfish and I get stuck in my own things, but it's something that is stuck with me. And I know the same thing that Paul knew about Timothy's community is what I know about our community, and that's that this next generation needs godly leadership. And so what does that mean for us practically? I'm going to tell you what. Forefront as a church, we have great opportunities to pour into little kids, to pour into teenagers. Like, if you want to be that voice, Becky would always use some help with them wire kids, because for real, like, those kids are crazy. I can't. No, they're really good, and they have a really good program going on. They get to hear good stories. They get to hang out with adults who care about them and want to teach them, want to set that godly leadership. We have Collide, which is a program for our middle school and high schools, and I will use your help. So holler at me. But there's an opportunity there where we are very intentional about providing a place where students can come hang out. They can get some teaching about the Bible, and they can build relationships from adults. Not adults that have it perfect, but adults that do want to set that path of godly leadership for them. And so maybe you're sitting in here like, I could probably get involved in that with the kids or with the teenagers and students, or, man, like, I got a kid, I got a teenager, maybe I need to get them involved in that. I don't know. But that's part of the next generation. But, the next generation, it doesn't really just have to do with, like, kids and teenagers. The next generation of Forefront as a whole is important to me. It's important to us. So you might be sitting there like, maybe you're one of our next gel group leaders. We always need more gel group leaders. Maybe you're the next person to step up and really take charge of what's going on in our community outreach as we work with groups like PEN and Aid Now and the Crisis Pregnancy Center. Maybe you are the person who's going to dream up the next big thing that this church does for its community that we don't even have on our radar. And really, guys, there's no maybe about it. All of us have the opportunity to be that godly leadership for the next generation, whether it's kids, teenagers, adults, our community outside of these walls or our community inside of these walls. There is a place. I told you guys the story of one man who in one moment set that path for me, a moment where I was taught to seek God and do good to other people. My question for you guys is, are you willing to be a Robert for somebody? Let me pray for you.